The situation was still very much in place in terms of New York not allowing pinball machines to be in active operation in the city. We leaped forward to 1975, the end of that year, and was still doing research for my book. Took 9 months out from GQ, traveling around with James Hamilton through Europe, around the United States, gathering pictures, doing interviews, trying to compile as much and as best as we could. Wound up getting contacted by the New York State Association. They were getting poised to try to reintroduce a new bill before the city legislature to re-legalize the operation of pinball machines. Elmer Guggenheim, who was the Commissioner of Consumer Affairs, seemed to be pro-inclined to do this, but they needed an expert witness who was not on anybody's payroll. Lo and behold, hi, let's get the expert, let's get this person to come in and to do this. It was interesting, just as an aside to it. Part of their argument was going to be that the city was allowing peep shows and adult venues in active operation, so we're going to compare what these things are, and pinball machines are, far less detrimental to society than that. And I've basically said, if that's a direction that you're going to take, then count me out. I don't want to be involved. You have to go in with the understanding that, to try to say, because this is bad and this is potentially less bad, let this in, is not an approach that I want to take, and it really demeans what this industry truly represents now, as well as what it has represented for the previous 5 decades. And when they realized that I was going to stand firm on that, they wound up changing their approach. The purpose of my going before the City Council in April of 1976 was to testify to the extent that I knew, historically and otherwise, what was available out there in the real world, because I traveled around and what have you. More importantly, I guess I had established myself as one of the foremost players in the world, and part of my testimony was to show that pinball was based on skill, not on chance, because that was really one of the defining points that LaGuardia used back in 1941 to outlaw the games. So, in April of 1976, I wound up going before the City Council, and in reference to your original question, one of the first questions out of the mouth of the fellow heading up the proceedings was, so who is paying for you to sit here and to testify? No one. We understand that you're doing research for a book. Who's paying for that book? E.P. Dutton. I mean, any way that he tried to ask it, it was like, I'm just here effectively as a journalist, as a budding historian, if you will, to recount the history of pinball machines, and nobody's paying for anything other than what the publisher has advanced me and whatever's coming out of my own pocket. And we then went on with my being asked a number of questions as to the proliferation of the games, who was playing them, what I had witnessed not only overseas but also domestically. And then it came to the crucial point, and there were 2 games set up in the courtroom. And TV cameras and all the rest of it were all there, which was kind of interesting. And I knew that at some point I was going to be asked to go over there and play that game and talk the City Council members through the rules and what have you of that particular machine. And this one person said, I guess it's time you're going to be demonstrating pinball for us. And I was like, yes. And everybody started moving over to what was an El Dorado game for those people who like the trivia. This fellow just stopped everybody and said, no, let's pick that game over there. And he pointed to a bank shot. Well, the only reason that there were 2 games that had been brought into the courtroom was in the event, as we all know, a mechanical device sometimes might falter. If that game broke down, that was the backup. It truly did not matter to me one way or another, but everything was stopped for probably about 20 minutes while all the camera crews scurried to set up their lights and everything else to not work on the rigged game that I figured that that's what his thought was, and for me to play the other game. And effectively, really what I did was I tried to explain that here was a pool-based game. The targets corresponded to various pool balls and so on and so forth. Talk a little bit about the geometry. Set the ball up, cradled it, made some shots, called some shots, and what have you, just to show that there was really a reason as to why everything was placed the way that it was and what the rule set was on the game. And basically, for my own personal and selfish reasons, it was, and there's even skill down to the plunger. Have these little markings and what have you, and I went back up to the top portion of the game where there are 5 lanes, and I said it's a 5-ball game. Ideally, the intent is for the player to skillfully plunge in the ball during each of the times to light all 5 of those lanes. And I said, if I can do this right, it should land right in the middle. Pulled it back, ball went up, back, little nudge, came right down the center. And the one guy said, enough, and stopped, and I didn't have to play anymore. I think if I would have realized what I was saying, I never would have said it. I mean, it was just, divine intervention that the ball actually landed where it did. Probably a little bit of skill too, but the idea of doing it that way. And the city council passed the resolution 6-0. And what I always thought was kind of appropriate, in a limited point of vanity, was that then Mayor Abe Beam, on my birthday, August 1st of 1976, signed into law the passage of pinball machines to be in operation.